Boom! According to that, I am live. Welcome. This is Tokyo Tonight. I'm just going to move the microphone. I should have done that beforehand. Move that closer over here. Good to see everyone. Yes, sound is working over there. Maybe just turn up the gain. Sometimes people say, well, I don't want it to redline too much. But yeah, good to see. We've got Steve from Berkeley, Quint Rankid, Shubus from Panama. Everybody is here. 8 people viewing right now. If you're viewing, say hello. It's always nice to hear people say hello. Not a lot of, in a way, some big news, of course, new government and everything this week. In other ways, not a lot of news. So I've picked out some topics, some things to talk about. But as always, of course, other people, if you've got topics or questions or whatever, as always, you can ask. Mr. Cordy Chep, there was daylight savings. I must admit, on the one hand, it's a bit silly not having daylight savings, but I must admit, having my mum in Queensland where they don't have daylight saving and living in a country without daylight savings, sure, the sun comes up at 4 o'clock in the morning sometimes in summer, but I must admit the time changing does get a little bit awkward. So Mr. Cordy Chip, does this make it later for you or earlier for you? Is this better? I think this means you're back to like a 1 hour time difference now, right? So it's earlier, I think. Or is it the other way around? Well, anyway, I think, oh no, that's right. Summer is starting in Australia, so it's the opposite. It's going to be later in Australia. Well, anyway, this is why I'm glad I don't have to think about it as silly as I think it is that Queensland doesn't have it. But yeah, Mr. Cordy Chap, we got, Steve from Berkeley, boom, indeed. Milchman too, woo, good to have you in here. Sergeant Bilko, good to see you, and nice saying hello to everybody there. 4 a.m. Are you in New Zealand? In fact, that's even beyond New Zealand. It's like a Hawaii time. Guys, English World, g'day, good to see you. Yes, it makes it later. Oh, I'm sorry about that. 270 AJ, big game in a few hours. Liverpool versus Man City. Yeah, the missus is going to be up and watching that. I look, from my perspective, I'm a New Zealand rugby fan. So, great game yesterday between New Zealand and South Africa, the Springboks. Which New Zealand lost, but it's one of those sorts of games where it was such a good game. I was okay losing, frankly. We're spoiled as New Zealand fans that we just win like all the time. It actually, this sounds awful, but it becomes like boring and repetitive. And the worst part of it is that the only time that we lose is during the World Cup. So I actually, it's actually much more interesting for us, and it's better for the team to feel like they can lose games. And I don't like the way that South Africa plays normally, but they played a great game last night. It was the sort of game where, again, could have flipped a coin. It could have gone either way. And so that was my big game last night. Of course, we just had the NRL final in Australia earlier this evening. I just watched the highlights just before this came on. We had the AFL final yesterday. I used to like that as a kid. In fact, I was into AFL before, or VFL back in the day, before I knew what rugby was, because I lived in Victoria as a kid. But lots going on. Soccer, and I call it soccer. Soccer's on here as well. So 8:35 a.m. in Panama. Well, I'm very glad that you can make it. I must admit, the coffee must be good there. That must be a thing about getting up at 8:35 in the morning and having some Panamanian coffee. That sounds like there could be worse things in the world. Spring in New Zealand, so the clocks all spring forward an hour. Oh, is that how it works? So does that mean they're up to 4 hours? So is it? Yeah. I don't even like to think about it. Does this mean they go to 5 hours ahead now, or is it? Do they go from 3 to 4? I should probably just ask Alexa what the time is in New Zealand right now. Didn't react. Good. But yeah, soccer. Well, it was called soccer before. Back in the day, originally football was rugby, and association football was soccer. It was a derivative, actually. It was soccer that split, not rugby. Yes, obviously soccer is the more popular sport, and it's the most commonly associated with the word football. But rugby was the original actual sport that used the term football. Shubis, I would go there for the coffee. In fact, I must admit, it was always back in the day, I majored in Spanish at university, and I spoke better Spanish than Japanese when I came to Japan. Obviously, that was 22 or 3 years ago now, so it's no longer the case. But I must admit, I've always wanted, I'm into surfing. I've always wanted to go to Costa Rica to surf. I don't know if they have good surfing in Panama, but I've always wanted to go to Central America for that anyway. So 2:30 a.m. in New Zealand. Okay, so 4 hours, but that is, well, it'd be impressive if anyone was here. Hey, we've got Erin in the house. Good moderator, good to have you with us. And Ed Avoid, good morning to our Arizona viewers and everybody else. Remember, as always, I'm here. I don't have anything else to do, so I am here every week. I'm going to turn off the aircon. I sometimes regret that if the lights can heat up. I'm here at 10:30 p.m. every Sunday, as you all know. Remember, if you want to grab my attention, if you want to ask me a question, request a topic, or just say hello, just type Hiko Simon. You don't even need to @mark, actually. It will highlight orange on my screen. And other than that, yes, say hello. Even if you've never said hello before, say hello. It's nice to see people's names and so on. It's nice to recognize who's watching, and I do appreciate the support. And I guess watch the show first, but if you decide at the end that you appreciate it and that you like it, remember to like and subscribe if you haven't. So all the normal formalities. One thing I was tempted to put in the topics, and I haven't put in the topics, but I might as well put in while we let people roll in. Hey, Mariligos, long time no see. Indeed, good to have you in here. I hope I pronounced that right, by the way. Is it Mariligos or Mariligos? That's how I sort of naturally read it. Tokyo 503, also good to see you as well. Digitalization, yeah, I saw that actually. So actually, question for Tokyo 503. I'm still digesting this, and I don't actually have coverage of this on the show tonight because I just saw it on the news earlier, and I've just been watching terrible movies all evening, which I'm about to talk about. Does this mean that Hirai-san is being replaced by Karen Makishima, who I know nothing about, by the way? It's great that they're giving... I think there are only 3 women with cabinet roles, so still a low number, although in the LDP... there's only like 9% of LDP representatives in Parliament are women, so I guess it's relatively high for the party, but it still is awful. But I think it's good to see some fresh faces. Will be interesting to see if it changes anything. I guess I do have some mild concerns about reforms, for example, in environmental policy and digitalization and bureaucratic reform. We're losing people like Kono was doing good at the bureaucratic reform, at the administrative reform. Koizumi, for all the backlash about the paper bags and so on, was making strides in environmental stuff. I do worry that that's all going to be moderated now, but we'll see. More people rocking in. We got Listeo, good to have you in here. And TP, hello from Kyoto. Follow me through Twitter. Well, that's awesome. I do appreciate it. As you know, I tweet far too much on Twitter, and I appreciate the interaction over there. So it's nice to see someone who found their way over here to keep me company on the weekly live stream. So TP, welcome. Good to have you in here. And from Kyoto, indeed, that's pretty cool. So anyway, not a topic that I'm planning to cover, but yeah, there's this thing where partly to keep people busy while they're working from home, you just tend to get into a bit of a routine of being stuck in. It's a bit of a prison routine, working from home for a year and a half. So people at work started the sort of thing of these projects to do stuff for fun over 9 weeks. And one of them was there was a running group that agreed, hey, let's all just agree what we think is a reasonable distance to run every week. And let's add it all up and see if we can, stick to that and achieve that goal. And we've already done that. I found it quite motivating. Given that I do about 6Ks a week, I thought if I made an 18K per week target, that'd be cool. But of course, since I was doing it, I started doing some longer runs, including some 20K runs. We had a typhoon this week. And nothing really to report on that. Just didn't go outside for a day and it passed over. Didn't really do very much, but it was a typhoon. It meant that because I was busy one day at work, then we had the typhoon one day, then I was busy again on the Friday. So I ended up not running for a few days, and I wanted to make up for the distance. So I ran an 18K yesterday, and I thought, well, final week, it's the final week of this 9-week sort of project that we're doing. So I thought, I might even go for a half marathon distance, but my legs started to get really sore towards the end, and I was an idiot. I should have just stopped running. But I kept running. I ran home, and I'm kind of hobbling about today. So that was a bit dumb. It was from a lack of stretching and probably pushing a bit too hard on the run. Not a pulled muscle exactly, just a really sore sort of behind the knee, kind of on the leg. So I'm just going to have to rest that and not run on it for a few days. The other thing, however, was I did a similar last-minute push on movies. So I can actually... go through and I'll tell you the movies that I've watched. They're all on Netflix, and most of them were absolutely terrible. Believe in Yourself, great to see you. We've also got Shripper. Good to see you, Shripper. Good afternoon. Did I pronounce that right? I'm guessing I didn't. Shripper? I don't know. Shripper? Good to have you with us. Anyway, where are you watching from? While I find that out. So the movies that I've watched over the last few weeks, let me go through. I just watched Downsizing this evening. Let me see if I can bring this up so it can appear. Oh, wait. Let's see if I can. Come on. Help me out here. There we go. Downsizing was awful. I gave it like 1 star. 1,000 words. It had Cliff Curtis, New Zealand Institution, and Eddie Murphy. Wow. That was a really, really bad movie. So that was I just watched it like this morning. That's like a 0.5 stars. That's like 1 out of 10. Downsizing, I gave 1 star, so that's a 2 out of 10. Rock and Roller, Guy Ritchie making basically, I guess if you talk about London like crime films as a genre, like westerns, and he just makes the same genre of movie, they're all good. That was a good movie. I actually gave it 4 stars. It's good to watch. But yeah, The First Purge I watched last night. I've never seen any of the Purge. I didn't actually realize it was a series. It just looked kind of interesting. It wasn't bad. I'm not into those sort of horror movies anyway. A bit nihilist. I saw Michael Bay was one of the producers, although thank heavens he wasn't one of the creators of it. But The First Purge, yeah, that kind of sucked. Sonic the Hedgehog was surprisingly good as a video game movie. Pretty good. I actually, I vouch for that one. Silent Tokyo, made by Dentsu, and this is why I gave up on Japanese film. Terrible movie. The Space Between Us was awful, although at the same time it didn't pretend, to be a science fiction. It didn't pretend to be anything cooler than it was. It was an interesting setting, but it was essentially a teen romance movie. God, why did I watch that? Anyway, it was bad, but it was kind of like, it wasn't, I didn't feel like deceived by it. It was okay for what it was. It's a heartwarming teenage love story, but God, if you want to watch that sort of thing. This series, Inspiration, not one of the movies obviously, but about the inspiration for civilian mission to space on SpaceX was awesome. The final episode where they actually went to space was just great. The animated original Ghost in the Shell. I'd never seen that before. Again, I'm from the wave of foreigners that came to Japan that were not into anime. I finally watched it, and it's beautifully like made. And to think it was the themes that it has, that it was made in 1995, were pretty cool. But yeah, like it was basically, the whole movie was philosophical exposition. It was just people in monologues the whole movie. And I was like going cross-eyed trying to keep up with it, and I thought, you know what, maybe if I watch it in English it'll be easier, so I went to go and switch, and there was no English available on Netflix. But then I realized, yeah, the problem isn't English. The movie is dense, and fans of the movie confirmed that later on in the chat on Twitter. So beautiful. I kind of get why it's got this deep following. I also get why it would probably be good on a rewatch. In fact, multiple rewatches, because there's a lot to dive into. But it's just pretty heavy and bewildering as a one-off movie. But yeah, I see why there's a lot of fans. Baby Driver, it's a stylistic movie done good. You know, all of these Fast and the Furious movies that just bash you over the head, pretending to be stylish and just being loud and obnoxious. That's a good movie. Recommend Baby Driver if you haven't seen it before. I heard good things about it but never watched it, but that was pretty good. Triple Frontier, like Narcos the movie, not so great. Eagle Eye showing its age a little bit as a tech paranoia thriller from the 1990s. Because I work in tech now, I don't want to spoil it, but very badly architected system. If you can, I don't want to spoil the ending, but nowadays, yeah, you'd totally build a system that wouldn't be defeated that way. Black Hat was garbage. Yeah, it was compelling, but it just fell apart at the end, which was a shame. Six Underground, wow, that was a bad movie, and I love Ryan Reynolds, and he was okay, but he wasn't good enough to save the movie from Michael Bay. That was like a 1-star movie. That was styled done badly. The whole thing was attempting to be stylish, like in a shouting in your face, am I being stylish kind of a movie, as opposed to Baby Driver, which actually did it really well. It was just awful. Just Mercy was okay movie. I wanted to watch legal drama. It didn't really have much legal stuff. It was just a lot of soppiness. It was okay, but I would have liked more legal stuff. Tammy, Melissa McCarthy, playing an obnoxious, unhygienic, unlikable person. Great cast, Saved by Susan Sarandon. I like Melissa McCarthy movies, but I didn't like Tammy at all. That was really disappointing. You know what? Mishima the Last Debate. I haven't seen that. So I guess that was probably something I started watching for a moment or something. Blood Red Sky. Like Snakes on a Plane on the German vampires. Surprisingly good. And I don't like vampire movies or zombie movies or, German movies. But I really actually quite liked it. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was actually a really good movie. I recommend it. Get Smart. I love the original TV series. Steve Carell perfectly cast. A good homage to the original series. Problem is I don't really remember it. I remember that Steve Carell was pretty good. So that was good. But yeah, Vivo the monkey, the singing Cuban monkey. If you want to watch a movie specifically about a singing monkey from Cuba going searching for his dead owner's old girlfriend who lives in Miami, if you want to watch a movie specifically about that, then I recommend Vivo. And any other circumstance, do not watch. Yeah, you have to be in the right sort of movie, the right sort of mood to watch a musical, animated movie for 3-year-olds. And I was not in that mood when I watched Vivo, so danger, stay away. Dinner for Schmucks, great cast, George Galifianakis and Steve Carell, and it was just bad. It was awful. It was just cringe, and not like even fun cringe. So that was a disaster of a movie. Green Book was a good movie. I thought, again, the old... why are we spending all this money bombing Afghanistan when Alabama's right there? You could do it a lot more cheaply. Just that old sort of theme that the South is horrible and racist, possibly getting done over again. Apparently, it's historically true, the story of it, and it's an entertaining story and a good cast. So I did enjoy Green Book. Unknown Origins, a Spanish movie, kind of an homage to like comic book culture, sort of Marvel films and so on, and it was okay, actually. It was okay. I'm not really into Marvel movies to begin with. The actual story at the end got a little bit weak, but it was an enjoyable watch. The Intern, horrible movie. The worst Robert De Niro movie I've ever seen. The moral of the story seemed to be that if you're a successful woman, all that you need is an old man to tell you what to do. Awful, horrible. Set it on fire. One Cut of the Dead, Japanese movie. I talked about this on the show previously. My favorite movie out of all these movies that I watched is One Cut of the Dead. I'd watch it again. It was really fun. I still am reliving it in my head. Like, really, really ballsy and well made. By the way, watch it and you'll 15 minutes in, you'll think I'm nuts. I said this before. You have to hold on, and the payoff is very, very good. Excellent movie, actually. 76, my first ever Nigerian movie. Also my last ever Nigerian movie. Apparently, I did read one positive review, but even the positive review, apparently this is made by the Nigerian, the Nollywood, the Nigerian soap opera industry, and they're all famous actors in Nigeria. Extremely, like student film level, low level budget. But even the people who like the film were admitting how like the editing is like terrible, how they used out of focus shots, how the dialogue is cut so it completely doesn't make sense. It was really bad. For a country with oil and 200 million people, I don't know how this is like a blockbuster. And it's a good idea for a movie. I was like up for it, but nope. Unfriended. I don't remember. I think I just watched that for a moment. I think I watched that in the past. Anyway, I didn't rate that one. The Last Mercenary. Surprising. was kind of entertaining. I give it points for having entertaining moments. Wow, Jean-Claude Van Damme is like old, but it's not like he's gotten worse. He's never really been that good. That's the thing. He's just been the same all along. So fun, kind of stupid, but fun. I watched it in French. In fact, no, I watched it in French, and then I realized I'm not gonna like read subtitles for a Van Damme movie, so I switched it into English. But it was kind of fun. Sandcastle, War is Hell, set in Jordan. The setting very well made and everything. Again, just kind of dark, and oh my god, why did I watch this? It was alright. Well made movie, just not much point to it, so I gave it like 5 out of 10. These I think I just checked out. I don't remember them. Army of the Dead, another style shouting in your face movie. Horrible. really, I gave it like 1 star. Better than the Six Underground, but not by much. And The Fifth Wave, that was the first one that I watched, and it was awful. It was a bait and switch. They made it look like a science fiction alien invasion movie, which turned into a love triangle, Twilight, Hunger Games kind of clone. And I felt deceived, and I wanted the aliens, just like Army of the Dead. I was rooting for the zombies, and same in The Fifth Wave. I just wished that the aliens would come and end it all, please. And they didn't. So they were like in the writing for the worst. But yeah, 1,000 Words, the Eddie Murphy movie, was pretty close to the worst. That said, I mean, there are some good recommendable movies in here. Those are my movie ratings and recommendations for this, like watching 20 movies in the last week. I don't know if anyone has any other takes on these movies, but that's me. I see guys, English World endorsing my Baby Driver review. That was a good movie. Great cast. Yeah, I was actually like, it made me realize that the problem with Six Underground and Army of the Dead isn't that they were trying to make a stylish movie. You can do that. It's just they were doing it badly. And Fast and the Furious, yeah, do it like Baby Driver and you're okay. Shripper, for 35 years, wasn't much of a stretcher either. I had the worst muscle pain, and it was the only thing that helped ease the pain was stretching. Yeah, I should have stretched before. I stretched a little bit before and after, but I ran 18K, and I ran a little bit fast. I went around the Palace, got a best time around the Palace, at least that I've recorded out of 3 runs, but it wasn't worth it. So yeah. Hey, bye McNeil, good to see you. Bye. Yeah. Anyway, let's dive into it. We're already 20 minutes in, and I've just been talking about stuff I haven't even planned to talk about yet. So first of all, new Prime Minister. So yeah, bear in mind, this wasn't a national election. This was an election within the LDP of who do they like the best, and bearing in mind that the Prime Minister wasn't even running for re-election as head of the party. So, and the head of the governing party gets to become the Prime Minister automatically. So this was basically, it ran pretty much as people were predicting, that chapter grassroots voters, basically like, registered Republicans or the equivalent thereof, in the first round they voted overwhelmingly in favor of Kono. Kono's in the first number, where he got like 255 in the first round, although again Kishida showed that he overwhelmingly had been quietly setting up for a lot longer to have the support of fellow people in Parliament. And those Parliament, basically the second round, it switches from being like 300 votes from grassroots members to only like 80. It's the same number as the number of parliamentarians. And based on his support among fellow politicians, Kishida won it pretty easily in the end. Interesting that Takaichi did pretty well. I mean, having Abe backer was interesting. So yeah, the result was that they have really shuffled up the cabinet. Actually, they've shuffled up the roles again. It's all within the LDP, so there's not expected to be dramatic changes. But, a lot of familiar faces. Hirai Daijin, the digital minister, has changed and been replaced with some fresh faces people haven't seen in cabinet before. Taro Kono has clearly been demoted to the head of communications, although that said, I mean, that's the sort of role that you could do interesting things with, but being taken out of administrative reform and the vaccine minister, which I think he was actually doing an okay job of. Noda Seiko Noda, she's been put in charge of the Making Babies ministry, trying to increase the population. So some interesting changes in there. Nothing there that I can really see that's going to dramatically change things, but we'll have to see what happens. Sadiq Hakanguris, good to have you with us from Miami there. Good to see you. Kang and Kodos, crap, 26 of us and only 10 likes. Let me fix one. Thank you, Kang and Kodos. Thank you for calling that out. Very much appreciated. And remember, yes, indeed, like if you like. So what's my take on the Kishida government? Well, honestly, Kishida's just sort of gone through his whole career. He was foreign minister for a long time, and he didn't really achieve anything, but he sort of didn't offend anyone either. And that's kind of what I predict of his prime ministership. Coming from someone like Suga, who's completely lacking in communication skills and charisma. I mean, it's amazing that he could become prime minister in the first place. Kishida, in contrast, is presentable. He looks like someone who, puts on a good suit and says a good speech, which is very carefully crafted to not offend anybody. And he'll be good at that sort of thing. It's hard to imagine that he'll be someone who would be innovative as prime minister, but there again, I mean, when you become prime minister, you can actually show that people have misjudged. So I guess we'll see. But yeah, I mean, he's a banker from Hiroshima by way of background, and pretty much known for just not really offending anybody, and that's how he got elected as prime minister within the party. Kono, on the other hand, is very, people either like him or hate him. And that's kind of his problem and why he couldn't get voted within his own party as leader. So, other than that, it's wait and see right now. But yeah, some interesting new choices there. I see we've got Odie Jr. Boom, you're late. Tithings of butter. Thank you for that. Butter, boom. So yeah, new government. So we'll see what happens. But that's it for now. Oh yeah, one thing I found interesting was when it was announced that he was like in a hotel ballroom, when it was announced that Kishida had been elected prime minister, the person sitting next to him was Keiko Obuchi, who used to be was the daughter of former prime minister Keizo Obuchi, and was actually under Abe was the minister of economy, trade and industry, a major portfolio, and she was clearly being groomed for being a future prime minister. She had to resign, however, because she took over her father's seat. Her father died. In fact, I think he died while he was prime minister. He had a very short term. She took over his seat, basically, as often happens in Parliament. You have these multi-generational hereditary seats. And so all of Daddy's staff took over all the fundraising and so on. And it turned out that there were some allegations of illegal, donations handling and so on. And when the police accountants went to go and investigate their accounting records, apparently everything was shredded, and then the hard disks were removed from the computers where all the accounts, or the political accounts, were kept. And apparently Obuchi herself took part in destruction of the computer hard disks with power tools to make sure that they couldn't be read by anyone, which doesn't sound incriminating at all. So apart from having to resign, she didn't go to jail because she destroyed all the evidence successfully. But apparently she had to resign. Well, the idea of her being groomed for future prime minister was gone. She had to resign as minister of the economy. And she earned the nickname Power Drill, which, I don't know if they still call her that, but I sure call her that. It's a great nickname. She's back. She's got a minor role in the government, but she's clearly in the Kishida sort of team. So the thing is, even for the power drill, money, politics, corruption scandal, which everybody in LDP seems to have anyway, she's not like ideological. This is the thing in the LDP. There are very few women there, and the women that are there are basically either hereditary, like Obuchi, and sort of raised and groomed, sent to good schools and worldly and so on, groomed for being good politicians and administrators. And the other half are just extreme right-wing extremists that just want to declare war on North Korea and draft everyone in the military and march them into the ocean. And there are a couple of those, including Sanai Takaichi, who's being backed by Abe. So, I actually, even for the corruption, if LDP's preparing a woman prime minister for the future, I don't mind if it's Obuchi, actually, even for all of that. But yeah, at least compared to Takaichi, who did very, very well in the election. So yeah, that was interesting. I'm glad people... Yeah, no, seriously, it doesn't sound incriminating at all, right? It's kind of impressive. Again, as someone who works in IT, yeah, you can wipe a disk, you can format a disk, but data is still recoverable. You can write over it 4 or 5 times. That takes time. But Power Drill, is a pretty good way to make sure that the accounting office doesn't find anything. At the end of the day, what can they charge you with? With I guess destroying evidence, but breaking your own computer. One John-san, good to see you. The Power Drill. That's a good nickname, right? So anyway, a bit of political law there, but interesting to see Keiko making a comeback. We had an interesting earthquake during the week. I wonder if I can pull up the chart. It was like the weirdest earthquake. There was like quite a big shake. This was the day before the typhoon as well. And you can sort of see it there. The center of the earthquake was like in the middle of the Sea of Japan, off the west of Japan. Yet there was no shaking on the east coast. And yet all the way from Hokkaido all the way down to Tokyo, it was a Shindo 3. And a Shindo 3 is a proper, like everyone would notice level earthquake. It's not like, is it shaking? Everyone would notice a 3, but it's not really properly scary. But it's a big quake. It was a 6.1 magnitude. And it was like, people were like, that must be a mistake. How can that show the epicenter in the middle of the Sea of Japan when all the shaking only happened on the west coast? And it turns out Yeah, that was 400 kilometers underground, and it was like having a great big long pole and sort of poking sideways and diagonally up at the surface. Apparently, this particular plate that was shaking pops out on the west side or the east side of Honshu. So yeah, we had a proper earthquake that was from the Sea of Japan, but surfaced on the east coast. So that was just interesting, I suppose. I mean, we have earthquakes all the time, so you might as well vary it a bit. And the scary earthquakes that we get really are the ones that are in the Pacific Ocean, which are typically just north of Tokyo. And unfortunately, probably where the next big one close to Tokyo is going to be. Plus, of course, there's always the Nankai Trough, scary one off Osaka, but there hasn't been much of that lately. This was just a different pattern anyway, so it was kind of interesting. That happened, I think, on Wednesday. So yeah. Quickly going back into comments, I don't see any. Yuko. Oh God, Tokyo 503, not Keiko. Sorry, thank you for the correction. I get mixed up because her dad was Keizo. I keep thinking in my head, yeah, Keiko. Thank you. Sorry, I really appreciate the correction. Tokyo 503. Yuko drill holes Obuchi. I mean, that was still kind of cool. But yes, thank you for the correction, Tokyo 503. Appreciate it. Something I learned I didn't know anything about. By the way, not jam and spoon. It's oh God, spoon and tamago, spoon and egg. Fantastic, everything channel, blog, Instagram, Twitter, all of that. I follow mostly on Twitter, and they do a lot of sort of art and culture sort of stuff. And actually, it was a combination of that, and I believe Melbourne, which is another great Twitter account to follow. We're talking about the history of I'm using an old version of iOS, the history of Popeye in Japan. And apparently Popeye, like the animation and the cartoon, were like hugely popular in Japan, like prior to World War II. They're very influential on Japanese animation, on Japanese manga styles, and they were so popular. It actually didn't even occur to me. Of course, there's like a really popular like weekly, or is it weekly? It might be monthly magazine called Popeye. But more than that, apparently, like, there's a bunch of Japanese pop culture which originates from being inspired by Popeye, like way back, like in the 1930s and 1940s. After the war, the original Donkey Kong game by Nintendo, my mind exploded when I heard this. The original design for the game was that it was Bluto keeping olive oil hostage, throwing barrels down with Popeye running after to go and rescue olive oil. The problem being they didn't have the rights for the characters, so they switched it to Jumpman, who of course became Mario instead of Popeye, and Bluto was changed into Donkey Kong. But that was the original idea, was they intended that as a Popeye game, and it would have been awesome as well. And it's kind of funny that it was like something they had to change at the last minute to invent the characters. I had no idea. That was like mind blown. So that was just something I didn't realize, that Popeye was like so popular. I remember, I mean, it was big when I was a kid, but it kind of disappeared. I remember, I think one of the first movies I ever saw as a kid was the Robin Williams movie of Popeye. I think I saw that when I was in Wellington, so I would have been 5 or 6 years old, around the time Empire Strikes Back came out, showing my age a little bit. But it was like, I think generations of parents tried to persuade their kids to eat spinach using Popeye, and it kind of worked. It kind of made it look cool. But Mr. Cordy Champ, that was the original name of Mario. Before Mario had a name in Donkey Kong, it was Donkey Kong and Jumpman. Not very creative, obviously, but that was because they couldn't use Popeye. So I thought that was fascinating. Next story that I have is so two big sort of stories that triggered a lot of discussion on Twitter. So I guess I will talk about those in a minute. The first is Japan is desperate. Like the government's assessed that, some economic think tanks have assessed that Japan needs to hire 270,000 artificial intelligence engineers. The problem being they don't exist. Bio McNeil, see, he remembers. It was, actually, it was, and this was like one of his first movies was Popeye. Anyway, Japan needs 270,000 AI engineers. I'll tell you what, I've talked about being, I have been an IT engineer as well as I work in legal in, tech companies now. I've done that I've spent a long time working in tech companies in Japan. I would not recommend, I've talked about why I would not recommend being an IT engineer in Japan. The fundamental reasons just are that it's just not respected. It's not considered artisanal. It's considered that these are like janitors that come in and you tell them to make your system and you make it for them. You get underpaid and overworked and abused for it. And the structure of tech in Japan. One reason that it's kind of funny, Japan is associated with being high tech, but at the same time, it's very, very behind. It's always been behind the whole time I've been in Japan. A lot of companies still running on Unix mainframes. Some switched over to Windows only to avoid the year 2000 problem. But even then, where, for example, on-premises SAP systems and ERP systems have pretty much all switched to cloud in most other countries, Japan has hardly started doing that. And it's just because fundamentally the big tech companies get away with charging for basically having engineers look after either custom mainframe systems or really outdated on-premises systems that they still charge premium rates for. And these companies don't have the choice. Typically companies in Japan don't do IT themselves. They outsource all enterprise IT to a few big, large IT vendors. And they've got a hold on the market where they sort of withhold, or they're just not capable of providing cutting edge technology. And they provide outdated tech, cheap. They acquiesce to every customer request for every customization, no matter how much it ruins the systems that they're building. And as an engineer, it just means long hours, terrible pay, terrible work conditions, and no appreciation. That said, right now, companies are feeling a sense of crisis that the lack of cloud and the lack of AI skills, when a lot of companies realize, particularly international companies, recognize they need these things to be internationally competitive. They are so desperate that they're going around the big IT providers that are not able to provide those skills, and they're directly trying to hire people from America and so on, and anyone from Japan who's been to America and picked up any sort of qualification in AI engineering. And NTT Data, realizing the demand, is offering in Japan what's unheard of, six-digit salaries. For new hires straight out of college for AI engineering. If you have any other form of IT engineering, and by the way, most IT companies don't care what you study in college. They just train you to do what your senpais did, which is building outdated IT technology. And they just keep milking that for licenses and for maintenance fees from customers who are sort of beholden to them. But recognizing the extreme demand for and lack of supply of AI services right now, whereas you'd be looking at $50,000 starting out in any other tech job, and that sounds okay. But when you consider that you're working basically 6 to 7 days a week, extreme hours from 8 a.m. to final train at midnight, it's not, 50,000 isn't good at that. When you break it down, I remember doing a job like that thinking I was getting paid pretty well when I first got to Japan, and I remember breaking it down to an hourly rate, and it was below minimum wage for Kanto. It was below McDonald's. While IT generally sucks, all of a sudden the government and a lot of tech companies have realized that hey, if they don't start re-engineering systems around you to use IT or to use AI in particular, there's a lot of industries that are competing against China, Korea, Taiwan, America, Europe, that are where those other countries and those other economies are using this sort of technology as a huge differentiator and a huge way to jump ahead, and Japan is not, and they're going to get left behind, and it's kind of a crisis. The reason that this will be so hard for Japan is multi-level. First of all, again, Japanese universities are like a holiday camp. Most Japanese employers do not take serious. They don't treat university as job training, so they don't care what you study. They treat everybody when you're a new hire at a tech company as like a baby that's just been born, and they train you from scratch. And I knew people from MIT who used to work at my first job in Japan that felt sort of insulted that they were had their education discarded. They had people who would be eligible for these sorts of jobs now, and that was just completely and on the other hand, I had a law degree and I was a foreigner. The Japanese co-hires that I had were all very smart people, but they were one was a vet, there was architects, and most of them quit. right away because they were miserable doing the work. They realized how bad it was. But so the first thing is, even if you get the universities to offer these courses, which they don't offer, because frankly, and even if they do offer them, the students hardly ever show up to classes at university, because you're supposed to like have fun at university, and they generally university education in Japan is not high quality, as you can see by the global rankings of international universities. Japanese universities just don't do well. But even if you do take it seriously, the companies don't take it seriously. So you could try fixing it at the university level, and they should try to do that. But at the same time, that's all sort of pointless unless the companies themselves offer the same training or recognize those qualifications. And then you have this other problem that the companies themselves don't have the ability to train. They don't have people who are experienced and know how to do AI engineering. This is the whole problem. So, what happens is when you join a company, you learn from someone who's 20, 30 years into the game how to build a 20 to 30-year-old at newest system and keep maintaining it for slave wages. And that's what they do, and that's why it's so miserable. There's just it's designed against advancement. So it is true that from an international competitiveness perspective, Japan needs 270,000 AI engineers, but structurally you've got to do it in spite of the way that IT is provided in Japan, and in spite of the way the education system is set up in Japan. It can be done, and I tell you what, I mean, if I was career counseling, a 17-year-old or 18-year-old Japanese person right now, you can get AI engineering certifications and do the training online. You can do it on your own. You can go travel overseas and get it, or there are Japanese universities that are now offering these. And I would say, it's a print your own money kind of a degree, because again, the companies that should be hiring and that should have been doing this are so clueless. They've created this sort of shortage. So it's a great opportunity for young people in Japan, but they really need help, because I think the standard university courses and standard companies just don't know how to overcome this problem on their own, even though the solutions are there. So my hope is, that young people themselves will turn this around by getting certified first, and through the desperation of companies to sort of, and the other thing is that it's a great opportunity for new IT companies to disrupt the large sort of oligopolist IT companies that have the stranglehold preventing innovation in IT in Japan, and that you'll have these small startup companies formed by university grads with AI engineering degrees that are not going to want to go and join a big company that doesn't, let them use their skills to serve customers. So there's a great opportunity for disruption of IT in Japan, just because they've made themselves vulnerable by protecting themselves and not innovating. But at either way, whether you end up going and working in one of the big players or direct at a customer or starting up your own company right now, it's a good time to be learning AI engineering. It's what I would recommend to anybody. And if you've got these skills overseas and you speak passable Japanese, it's actually it is the one area of IT, well, that and maybe cloud, that I would recommend coming over, because there's a desperate shortage of skills. So, there's actually an opportunity. There's gold and then there are hills, at least in terms of these areas. I wouldn't come over here for any other form of IT, however, infrastructure engineering other than cloud infrastructure. Traditional infrastructure, mainframe, ERP consulting. I've done that. Do not recommend it in Japan, but this is an interesting time. So yeah. Into the comments. See that there's a few there. We've got 270 AJ. Let me just check. I think we go back over here. Learn Python, Hiko, says Mr. Cordy Chip. I learned ABAP. I learned how to program SAP. I threw those books away, and I sometimes still on LinkedIn I get people say, hey, do you want to do SAP again? And I'm like, well, wonderful system, all of that, but no. I'm glad I learned how to program. It helps me with my job today, at least when I work with programmers. It means I can have meaningful conversations, but I would not want to do that again myself. It's fun, but respect to the people who can do it. 270 AJ, I've been going through Skippy, Python libraries for machine learning documentation. They are good. They shouldn't be difficult to understand for someone who knows Python. Well, that's right. As I understand, everyone who is starting out with Python nowadays, the thing about the algorithm design, and plus, I know a lot of the big IT companies are also doing a lot of things to make AI engineering more accessible. Of course, it's great if you can do it from scratch, and that's the highest value. But there's a lot of stuff. I mean, I've got an AI camera behind me over there, which I've played around with as well, although I use templates and everything. I never program from scratch. I just sort of tweak and follow manuals for it. But yeah, it's actually, and this is the other thing, programming language is getting easier to use. It's getting less laborious. It's getting more efficient over time. Python is much more, I mean, compared to Java and compared to the languages around when I was doing it, yeah, it's easier to pick up. It makes more natural sense, and it's going to keep improving. So yeah, I think it's actually, if your brain's still soft, as Japanese people say, even me, I mean, I was not a math science inclined at all, but I could learn it. So there you go. 270 AJ, college students could probably learn Python. I agree. Go through Skicket, learn documentation, maybe take a course on Coursera. Well, that's right. And all the certifications are available online, and they're mostly free to take nowadays as well. So I actually think it's actually it's a good opportunity if you know what you're supposed to do. The biggest problem is I think just that university students are clueless in the places that they would look to for information. The university institutions and the big companies that they think of as the places that they want to go work. The problem is those places are clueless. So getting the right information to the students on how to set this up and what opportunities it opens up is the problem. But yeah, huge opportunity for anyone who picks the right subjects right now. Christopher Liu, good to see you, by the way. When you were at university in Japan, it was a joke. Yeah, that's why I wanted to go to university in Japan. I feel like I missed out going to university in New Zealand and then coming straight to Japan. I should have just come as a year off. I was tempted to come to Japan. Did I say One John-san? Hello, good to see you, One John-san. Fire. Good to have you with us. Check out what other comments are there. We've got Quint Rankid. What are the investment companies, stock traders do in Japan for IT? Are they building systems to read the market, or do they farm that out? That's an interesting one. From what I understand, the international investment banks, of course, they spend more on IT than they spend on their investment bankers. That's how much they put into all of this. And as I understand, they engineer in-house. In fact, I have friends who are traders who could lecture me about stuff that the tech companies I work in that I could not talk about how to engineer, how to use, for example, cloud instances, CPUs, cloud infrastructure, and so on. So they're pretty good at virtualized, hyperscale computing and high performance computing infrastructure, as well as absolutely they're using IT to death. I think that they do get some help, but the remarkable thing about those investment banks, they appreciate the value of the technology and they are investing in doing it in house. In terms of the Japanese investment banks, the Nomuras, the Daiwas, and so on, not quite so clear. I think clearly they do use IT, especially the investment banks do use IT better than regular banks and the rest of the economy. But I think they tend to lean more on traditional vendors, particularly for the Japanese ones, and they've been slow. And in the end of the day, the way the whole investing works just purely domestically in Japan, insider trading is basically still kind of quasi-legal in Japan, and that's what they work off. They don't really need AI when they can just work off being directly fed information. So like most things, I think the domestic market for it is really lagging, and it's more dependent on the big IT companies. But the global companies that are in Japan are big users of this stuff, and they are in-house, and they pay through the nose to get the best engineers, actually, like more than the consulting companies and the IT companies do. They are IT companies now, so yeah. Anyway, boom, next subject. The next subject also, this generated a lot of discussion. I don't know a lot about teaching English in Japan. I see there are some people here who might know more about this. It was interesting I made a quick offhand comment about this. There's an article on Nippon.com talking about how many Japanese students see English as useful for the future, but they dislike it as a subject. And a lot of people saying, well, people don't make it interesting enough. And my hot take on this is, I think the problem is that it's a mandatory school subject. So, ask a student any subject that they're forced to do homework on that's taught in class. As much as I kind of feel for the teachers, in the sense that for the English teachers, for the people who come, the assistant language teachers and so on, as much as you want people to be into what you're doing, in the end of the day, I don't remember being into, actually, I think there's another problem. You generally look back on school a little bit more nostalgically than you looked at it at the time. I actually kind of was into social studies and history, but I must admit, if you go back to like middle school, Like, was I into math? Was I into geometry? Was I into calculus? Was I into, it was all just stuff that you're being forced to do. Half the time you don't really know why you have to do homework, and you're just trying to get through it all. And it's basically like a chore. Any school subject. And when you make a school subject mandatory, on the one hand, it's good that you're giving everyone a baseline for being able to learn English and use English later on, perhaps. Ideally, you'd want them to love the subject so much that they become experts or they go on an international exchange. But in the end of the day, short of that, for most kids, it's like making your bed. It's like tidying your room. I think it's just hard, no matter how good an English teacher you are. And of course, there's many, many levels of English teachers. Fundamentally, for the kids, it's, the whole thing is just homework and chores. So you're going to struggle to motivate kids who haven't made a conscious choice to recognize either the value or to learn the language. And that's just always going to be tough to do. And this is a natural outcome. Even those who can connect it to being useful in the future. I think that's what I respect about people who come here and teach. I think that's the toughest part of the job, having to sit in front of a class of 40 kids that, feel like you're dishing out chores and trying to make them excited for what you're trying to teach them. And for the teachers, for those magical teachers that can actually inspire kids to be interested and love the subject that they teach. And I had teachers like that, they exist, but they're rare, and it's just because it's just the nature of the beast, I think. And I don't think it's unique to Japan. I see so many people lecturing. So much chatter when I tweeted this opinion that the problem in Japan is katakana, and it encourages kids to pronounce English words wrong using Japanese phonetic alphabets instead, and people complaining at the way it's taught. And I bought into that for a long time, but I think that what people are overlooking is that I think like language is being taught. I mean, I was forced to do Latin for 3 years at high school, so it's sort of. I don't think it's unique to Japan. I think it's just part of the experience of being a kid in mandatory education, being forced to take subjects that, you just sort of resent it for the fact you're being forced to do it. And I think it's hard to motivate kids for that. And it's hard to overcome that. I don't know how you can improve that. I mean, it's also part of the nature of mass education that you've got a bunch of kids in a classroom and a teacher lecturing them on what they should do. So, I don't know what the answer is. I know there are lots of ideas on changing the whole approach to education and skills like this. And certainly, I mean, another part of it is, remember, the whole origin of education was really for educating kids, to, in the 19th century to be able to do repetitive work to instruction in factories. Whereas now that we're really, the subject I was just talking about, what the economy needs right now is not obedient factory workers. It needs creative AI engineers. And the question is, on the one hand, school does give you skills for developing your brain and your learning capability and your discipline and your sense of routine and all those sorts of things. But in the end of the day, is an education system that was really invented to create clothing, cotton mill workers in the 19th century, really the right sort of education system for what we need right now in the 21st century in countries like Japan. And it's probably not, but no one really has. Unfortunately, we're sort of locked into the model that we have. I would love, and kids just are going to push back anyway if you make them do it. Maybe if you taught them Russian, they would just learn English to be rebellious. Perhaps that's the way to do it. I don't know. It's a big challenge. And of course, I am not an English teacher, so a lot of people feel the struggles of this day to day and think about this a lot and shared a lot of opinions about this. And I'm curious what people have in the comments to say about this. But from my perspective, I think it's just some aspects of it are just going to be, there are just going to be kids who are just going to sit there and be looking at the clock and waiting to go home and not doing it because they're being forced to do it. And that's kind of unavoidable, I think. And who knows, become an AI engineer and maybe you can figure out how to, create tools that frankly make it both easier to learn and less necessary to learn even. Maybe you could have put in a AirPod and have it accurately translate everything in real time, and from that maybe you can learn well enough that you can learn it more quickly. I don't know. It can feed you the lines. Quinn Rankin, I covered that question before. So we've got believe in yourself. I remember being so excited about the quadratic formula. Well, that's pretty cool. I really struggled with math. I always liked history, actually, and I must admit I do nothing but watch history channels now on YouTube. But it's kind of funny because I literally do school learning for for recreation now. And I must admit, it is different when you're doing it out of your own interest and fun, rather than being forced to do it at school as part of homework. Quinn Rankid, I'm always confused about the point of school. Is it to train kids to sit still in a chair all day, or is it to teach the kids things? So it's a good question. I mean, that's the point. I think the original context of school was this idea of this sort of job training and so on, for that, for that idea of having kids sitting in mills and, all day in the 19th century. I mean, I guess that was what the current system, that's one of the theories of the current system. Of course, schools have existed all the way back to ancient times. But, yeah, I mean, I would like to think that the idea of school and education, I mean, I still do education at work. And from my perspective, it's where I work, I don't rely on rote learning. I rely on the ability to handle novel situations creatively and appropriately, and to have a good thought process. And that's part of the nature of my profession. So I spend a lot of time on education, but the kind of education that I focus on is not on memorizing. I must admit, the thing I hated about law school was memorizing court cases. And then when I went back years later to get qualified in New Zealand, the case names had all changed, and the names are like just random, right? They're not connected to the rules that the cases are associated with. And it's not, the rote learning I hated, but the logic and principle is something that I really like, and how you take a principle, of okay, if you have this sort of a problem, this is how you're supposed to, this is the best way to address it, but you could also do it like this, and these are the pros and cons. Training people how to think and how to use their brain. The brain is a kind of a muscle. So I do think education does serve a purpose to, it's a structured environment which to encourage people to develop their thinking skills and their ability to be creative and to reason and think logically. And it serves a purpose for that. But yeah, I do wonder if the current structure is the right way to set people up to do that in the best way. So indeed, we've got... Believe in yourself. I would push back against anything I was being forced to do, but I was unable to resist my mother that we were homeschooled. She was relentless. Yeah, that's some respect there. That would be, I really couldn't imagine that degree of effort. Hicker Simon's choices, space and current affairs. Well, that's damn straight, pretty much. Yeah, that's pretty much what I did nothing but watch recorded. I'd record. New Zealand only had 2 channels, but fortunately there were a lot of space documentaries, and I'd record them all on VHS and just watch them over and over and over. And current affairs, yeah, social studies. That is probably the subject I like the best, and that's kind of what I'm still doing, I guess. So yeah, Mariligos. Part of the struggle is the kids have other teachers who cannot use English, or worse, actively dislike English, and they feed off those feelings, and it elevates the apathy. Yeah, that would absolutely feed into it. I mean, yeah, and as you go up, you have so many teachers, and the quality varies as well. So yeah, I imagine that'd be pretty awful to have to keep up with all of that. Guys, English World, who, by the way, isn't saying to me, but just I'm interested to see the take. I don't think that the kids hate English because the kids are forced to do it. It's because they're forced to learn grammar and vocabulary so that they can be tested on it. Well, that's kind of what I mean. Sorry, and perhaps, yeah. But like I said, it's presented as a chore. You could probably present it in a better way. But by the way, that's the way I learned Japanese. Kanji tests and grammar tests and so on. And I sucked at Japanese in New Zealand. And I stuck with it, not because I enjoyed the classes, but because I wanted to speak Japanese and I wanted to be able to go to Japan. But I had a purpose attached to it. It wasn't the process of learning that I enjoyed. So that was the other problem, and I think it's the same in reverse. Christopher Luke, you like the Japanese is so bad at English. It makes knowing Japanese seem useful in a way that knowing Dutch just seems useless. Well, yeah, I know, and that's partly why I guess it was good I invested in learning Japanese. It's one thing about Chinese as well, apart from the fact that Chinese is a grammatically very simple, but a very phonetically difficult language for English speakers to learn. Of course, English is so relatively easy for Chinese speakers because the word order is the same, and I think it's relatively easy for them to make the sounds and so on. Whereas Japanese, it's actually a much bigger barrier. So you're right. Although Japan's gone out of fashion a little bit, absolutely, you can still be appreciated for speaking Japanese here. I think that's true. Sainted Sir, glad that you made it before the end. Indeed, good to have you in here. And boom, got a few more minutes. Actually, just on time at the moment. I've only got 2 or 3 more stories. 3 more stories. Okay. What was this one? So there's a bit of a controversy about okonomiyaki from Kishida. The Prime Minister is from Hiroshima, and there's a bit of a thing where someone, an Osaka politician, made a bit of a joke saying, oh, I guess we're going to have more Hiroshima yaki now. And apparently Hiroshima has its own style of okonomiyaki. Okonomiyaki, for those of you who don't know, it's basically like a pancake mix, except instead of it being sweet, it's savory. And you can put anything you like into it. Typically, you'll start with cheese and maybe some sort of fish and some veggies and whatever. But it's basically like corn fritters, an omelette sort of turbocharged. It's made of these big sort of pikelets, savory pikelets, and it is delicious. Osaka has better food than Tokyo. They've always put strong sweet sauce and mayonnaise and stuff on top. And you can put anything into the okonomiyaki. Okonomi means whatever you like, yaki, cooked. So it's literally like savory pancakes with whatever you like. The Hiroshima version of okonomiyaki is that you put ramen. For some reason, you put noodles into the mix or sort of on top of it. To me, it's a little bit silly. It's the same as like having the yak. So they like to put soba, yakisoba. Sorry, but not ramen. They put yakisoba noodles into the okonomiyaki. Which is a bit to me like putting yakisoba noodles like into rolls, like some convenience stores do. It's just like, well, it's like having a spaghetti pizza or something like that. It just doesn't make sense to have 2 types of carbs on the same thing. But it is what they do in Hiroshima, and it still tastes pretty good. I mean, there are basically 3 big variations geographically. There's the Osaka okonomiyaki, which is awesome, and in Tokyo, people love it as well. And it's fun. You go to a restaurant and you cook it on a big hot plate in front of you. You put whatever you like into it. You can put kimchi, you can put beef, you can put fish, you can put seafood, you can put any sort of veggies that you like, and they'll bring it out and you just make it, and it's awesome. The Hiroshima version with the yakisoba on top is kind of their specialty, which is fine. I kind of don't see the point, but it's okay. And then you've got the Tokyo version of this called monjayaki, which is horrible. And no one in Tokyo, I've never met anyone in Tokyo who thinks it's better than the Osaka or Hiroshima versions. You just go to a monjayaki restaurant and you order a monja first, which is basically just runny. It's like a really runny pancake that you just sort of cook until it's kind of scalding, and you scoop it up with a spoon to eat. It's not like a solid pancake. And it doesn't taste as good, and it burns your tongue. So basically everybody goes in and they order like a pity monjayaki, and then they spend the rest of the night eating okonomiyaki, and even the restaurants themselves must be in on it. You go to Tsukiji in Tokyo, or Tsukishima, which is famous for monjayaki restaurants, and they know that they're going to be serving mostly okonomiyaki all night, even though they've got monjayaki on the top, because no one likes it. But in any case, somebody called the Hiroshima okonomiyaki, they called it Hiroshima yaki, and a lot of purists got upset. But an opportunity to learn about one of the best foods in Japan, actually. Not typically imagined as Japanese food, but really is pretty good. Sergeant Bilko, no music tonight. I should bring the music back. Thank you for reminding me of that. On royal families, I'm going to go through this one really quick as well. Apparently, Princess Mako from the royal family, she's like a niece of the emperor, so she's not really in the direct line of accession. And by marrying a commoner, she won't be in the royal family anymore. She's planning to marry Kei Komuro, whose mother has debt problems and apparently tried to ask the royal family for a bunch of money before the wedding, and various sort of problems. But who cares, honestly? Kind of irrelevant, honestly. And she's going to be leaving the royal family. But the person that she's married came back into Japan, and the media just looking for anything for attention. He had grown his hair out and had a little bit of a ponytail at the back. And the media went into a frenzy of this is unacceptable for someone with a ponytail to be marrying a princess. And now she has PTSD, adjustment disorder. And again, on the one hand, I mean, the whole thing is stupid that you would pay attention to all of this in the first place, besides the fact it's irrelevant, besides the fact she's about to leave the royal family, and it's about the guy's hair. And Japanese are saying, oh, this is like Meghan and Harry. And it's like 1/10,000th of Meghan and Harry. I mean, there's a big difference between growing a ponytail and saying that the entire royal family are racist. And she's probably right. I mean, honestly, the whole thing just made me... I don't know whether it's middle age or I've always been sort of indifferent. Like, fine, you want to have the royal family, national unity symbol, so long as they can't actually do anything, who cares? But when you find out that they're like, just being traumatized by being in the family like this, or you see people going this stupid over it, it makes me just think, why are we spending tax money on this? And is this really necessary for the integrity of the nation, for there to be a family that is basically just like a bunch of dolls that you can't ever have do anything? I must admit, in New Zealand and Australia, to want to become a republic in the sense of a republic in the Commonwealth being a country that doesn't have a monarch, it's like, I'm becoming Republican in the non-American sense of the term. That, what a waste of drama and so on. Congrats to Princess Markle. Just don't read the papers, marry the guy, go live on an island somewhere. Kind of silliness. Final thing, COVID numbers are like down. They're down to like getting down below 200 cases a day, which is, as good as they've generally gotten. Almost certain that there's going to be another wave in December. Right now, thank heavens, the Ministry of Health is looking at how are they going to prevent the hospitals running out of capacity like they did during the fifth wave. I'm also hoping, of course, that vaccinations will reach a point by November or December when the next wave should come along, that there'll be fewer serious cases and deaths. Hopefully, there'll be more people protected at least from getting serious cases. I don't think anyone's under the illusion that it's going to prevent people from getting COVID so much. I mean, that's the ideal hope, but at least the understanding that it should lead to fewer serious cases. It should provide some degree of protection. And if we get through the sixth wave relatively well, I am very hopeful that in the start of next year, that'll be when we start opening up the country and people can come here on their student visas and their work visas and maybe even tourism visas, provided that they're vaccinated. So I think, how the next wave goes will be sort of pivotal. The worst cases is that we get a new variant that the vaccines don't work on and we're back to square one. I think the best outcome is that it just becomes a mild wave. And we'll have to wait and see. But I'm optimistic that things are getting better in Japan. So, hopefully the country's improving soon. It's going to be reopened soon. That's all the stories that I have tonight. I'm going to go back into the final round of the comments. Boom. Good to see that Saint Did Sir made it. We've got, I should play some music sometime. Wingstar, hey now, long time no see. Good to see you in the comments there. One Johnson, tried monja with curry, cheese, sweet corn. It made it crispy, beautiful. I do like the crispy, like I said, I can appreciate like scooping up the crispy umami parts of the monja is nice, but would I want to spend a whole night doing that? No. Like I say, you get one sympathy monja and the rest of the night you just go on to okonomiyaki. I've never met anybody, even from those districts full of monjaki restaurants, who would actually prefer a night of nothing but monjaki over okonomiyaki. But yeah, believe in yourself. This is why you have a ponytail, grown at first as a way to rebel against those offering the inclination to experience anxiety at work. It is still here. Fight the power. Good on you, believe in yourself. And believe me, I would if I could, but I can't, so I won't. Quinn Rankid, have I ever watched any Ozu films? I'm not sure, which may answer your question, the fact that I'm not sure. What's an Ozu film? I feel tempted to Google it quickly, except you'll have to tell me. I guess the fact that I'm saying I don't know perhaps answers the question for you. But yeah. Anyway, look, that's the show. Remember to like if you liked. I do appreciate it when people do that. 15 likes at the moment. Thanks again to everybody, including Sympathy. Yeah, it's like a pity monjayaki. Seriously, Aaron's got it. Thanks to Aaron always for the moderation skills. Do appreciate it very much. And everybody, look, have a good week. Stay safe. Follow me on Twitter if you want to follow me on Twitter. Same time every week, Japan time, 10:30 p.m. Japan Standard Time on Sundays. Take care, stay safe, and I guess I'll give one more minute just to see if Quint, because I know that there's a lag with the comments. Quint, give me an example of Ozu films that I might have watched. I must admit, I do want to answer that question. I'll count down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Anyway. Steve from Berkeley, thanks everyone for the thumbs up. Thanks for watching. Thanks for keeping me company. Have a good week. Stay safe. Boom. See you next weekend. Shubas, have a good day there in Panama. I'll see you later. Wrong mouse. Boom. See you later. Oh. Wait. There's Aussie Films. Aussie was a filmmaker who made some classic films. I think they're great. Okay, I'll look it up, Quentin. Thank you for the recommendation. Have a good week. Eric Bailey, good to see you. Good night all. Have a good one.